So welcome along. For those catching the recording, welcome to week 7. We've got so far a small crew on board tonight, so nice to see those who could make it, and I hope all's well with those who haven't been able to. So tonight, as we start off, good chance to just check in briefly with everyone. I'm just going to call on a couple of people just as we reconnect. Something interesting or good. I'm going to stay away from bad, but interesting or good that's happened for you since the last time you got together, so about a week ago. I actually got to get on a plane for the first time in I don't know how many months. It was one of those new experiences. I had to remember how to pack and got to go to a conference like a big person and stay overnight. It was a bit of a novelty. So I'm not sure how true that is for other people, but that's my news from the week. So let me, Chris, you were pretty early in the room. Piece of news for you, from you?
Yeah, good news, I guess. So I was successful in obtaining a grant from the government. So as part of, it's called the Business Boost Grant. So it was part of the COVID relief, designed to stimulate businesses on the way out. So we're going to use that for a brand new website for the business. So custom built platform, integrating a few things with online bookings and better tracking of clicks and things like that, so we can really see not only people just clicking on the book now button, but going through to completion. And so that takes a little bit more technical coding for well above pay grades above me. But yeah, my little old Wix website that I made myself is going, and a big monster. So it wouldn't be possible without the grant. So I'm super pumped.
That's great. You must have been quick off the mark, because those grants, they've had a couple of rounds of them. And no, they evaporate. They're gone in like minutes.
Yeah.
It seems like when they open.
Yeah, 40 minutes. The portal closed. So opened at 9 o'clock and 9:40 when it closed. I was sitting there at 5 to 9, refresh. I had everything pre-done. So yeah, it was in the end. So it's certainly, it's not insignificant, the amount that we got given. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Good news. Well done. Look forward to seeing the website. Babak, I've got to go to you because that shirt is just screaming, pick me, pick me. That's
okay.
What's your news from the week?
Nothing in particular. Simon's done, tick. And another good news, not good news, but we plan our Christmas trip. So accommodation, we tried actually a few weeks ago, was actually the particular accommodation we were interested wasn't available. We go to Airlie Beach. But luckily, we had a phone call this morning. Actually, they accepted. They said, actually, one available. So we booked our accommodation for Christmas. That's our happy place. And we're going to, which is, very excited.
That's something to look forward to. That's great. Glad that worked out for you. Faith, any news from your world? Looks like you've got the northern lights or the southern lights in the background. I didn't make it to Tasmania to see that.
I grabbed a random background and now I can't work out how to turn it off.
It's spectacular.
Just a really busy week for me. So we had board meetings this week, which we're organising and running, which went really well. But they've asked for another session in December, which leaves me about 4 days to get the paper and stuff ready. in time for the next one. But otherwise going pretty good, and also been preparing for Christmas and taking a bit of a break, so booking in accommodation and things.
That's good.
So that's me.
It's nice to be able to look forward to that.
Yes.
Thanks. Amanda, how about you?
Meeting. I had an interesting week. I was rung up last minute for a job interview yesterday. And so one of the questions was, how would I manage change and what would I do in terms of a strategy and a change plan, which was pretty much word for word from the last assignment.
They come in handy sometimes. That's great.
So I could talk about, alignment and people, building trust and connecting with people and aligning the strategies and practices. So I must have sounded pretty convincing with that. I had a lot of great practice with the team. Looking forward to hearing how I went with that role.
Yeah, no, good luck and let us know.
Thanks.
But do you know when you'll find out? If they've given you an indication of what the time frame is?
Not yet. So I did have a bit of a presumptive talk about when I would potentially start. So I think it'd be in the new year now, because the industry shuts down in about 2 weeks' time anyway.
Yeah. Fingers crossed for you.
Thanks.
Hope it works out well. All right. Anybody else? One last. Cheryl, you can drop it in the chat box as well. Anything from the past week? Belinda. And it can't be that you saw me. I know that was the highlight of the week, but you know.
I've literally just got off a phone call with my direct peer in South Africa, and he's just taken me through some really exciting, sorry guys, engineering geek stuff in terms of being able to do something that is taking things to like seriously the next level from engineering side of things. And I'm sort of like quite buzzed about it. And I think when I talk to my team about it and would they like to be involved in it, I'm pretty sure it'll be like 5-year-olds on a Christmas sugar high. So I know what I'm thinking. So I think they'd be pretty impressed as well. So, you know, these good things happen when you don't expect them.
Yeah. Oh, well, geek out on it. Enjoy. All right. So thanks for sharing those. And if you've got anything else, drop it in the chat box. It's nice to share good news and interesting things that are happening, especially in this environment where we don't sort of get to communicate in what used to be normal. So tonight, the focus tonight is on coaching, and I hope that you've found some of the materials online to be useful. And if you haven't had a chance to look at them, that you will have a chance to go through some of that material along the way. So tonight we're going to start out just by a quick breakout room share on your experience of coaching, and that can be either being coached or being the coach. And we're looking really from out of that some lessons and approaches. So some tangibles in terms of things you've learned about it, some approaches you might have applied, or principles that you've seen work on either side of the equation. So we'll just do a quick check-in on that. And then we'll take a look at a couple of different coaching frameworks, some of the foundational principles. And then after we take our break, we'll actually go into a little coaching practice session where you can work with one of the frameworks and just have a play with using a coaching framework that you'd like, because there's lots of them, as we'll see. There's no one right one, but one of the things we would like to make sure that you've got some exposure to is some of those frameworks, and then working out which ones might be useful and relevant for you. So if we can have some breakout rooms, I think maybe just 3 people, not sure what the numbers are. One terrible at this one too.
Yeah, that works. We can create 4 groups of 3.
Yeah, perfect, thanks. And we'll just take 10 minutes. When you come back, if one person can just give us like a 2-minute snapshot of some of the key things out of your discussion, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure, if you're going for 3 or 4.
Okay, so just quickly around the groups, it doesn't have to be this person, you might have worked out somebody else, but I just picked a name out of each group. So the backs group, somebody give us your snapshot on coaching.
I can do it if you like.
Thanks,
we actually just shared some experiences we'd had. I'm fortunate enough, I have a coach at the moment that I've been working with, which has been really helpful. And I guess my key observation is they kind of make you take the time and reflect properly and think about and ask good questions. Michelle shared a story around an experience she's having with a staff member, and how it can be really hard when it's a difficult sort of conversation, and maybe you've got to give some feedback that the person might find challenging, and how you deal with that. And we sort of spoke about the idea of clear is kind. So avoiding the negative feedback isn't necessarily good for that person or you, but that can be hard to do. And then Harrison was sharing a story around his involvement in a program at his work, mentoring, and how using his sort of getting clear on what the person was trying to get out of it, and doing pre-preparation really helped him to bring value to that conversation.
Thanks, Faith. That's all good points. It is that time to reflect, thinking it through from a different perspective. And from the coaching side, it's amazing sometimes it seems very sort of basic at one level, but often it is the opportunity, I think, for people to sift through what's happening and make sense of it out loud, outside their own head, which most of us don't have too, we don't want to burden other people with it, but the opportunity to talk through and help them make sense of it is really useful. And your point about, giving feedback, and, it's difficult, and it's amazing how often you hear people say, I've kind of inherited this person who's managed for 10, 15 years sometimes, to just be sort of, the buck has been passed on down the line and it's ended in your lap, and it's either, okay, do I just sort of pass them on down the line, or do we stop this? And you think it's pretty brutal sometimes for a person to be told this is an issue, because most people aren't stupid and they can work out. So if you're calling me out on that now, I've been doing that for 10, 15 years, nobody else said it. I often think there must be a huge sense of betrayal or something, that why didn't somebody say this? So when we do it, it is, as tough as it is, it's also a gift, because most of the time we're genuinely trying to help somebody actually get out of their own way. But these things can just get passed on down the line. So thank you for sharing those things. Chris and Co.
Yep. So we heard from Lorena, who had a really positive experience with being coached. So she, that basically brought up for us a little bit around that boy outsource model. So looking at her current, so what's the current self look like, and then what's the ideal future, and sort of her coach was helping her really be outcome focused on what that looks like, and how to achieve it and get there. So really outcome and goal focused. And then we just spun a few stories around. So I kind of chimed in with the fact that my experience with coaching, both being coached but also as a coach, is I've really preferred to do it in a one-on-one environment. I've had a bit of experience with group coaching as well that I didn't think really went very well, because I just don't think it focuses on the person being coached enough. I think that there's enough uniqueness to each person's situation that you can't kind of group it. And I feel like in a group, sometimes the gaps between where someone is and where another person is doesn't, like, they sort of get consumed. So if one person's here and another person's below, they can sometimes get consumed, like an averaging sort of effect, I guess. So yeah, that was us in a nutshell.
Thanks. That's interesting. I'm not sure if this is going to be my ultimate conclusion, but this year I've kind of worked out very, very similar to what you're saying, that one-to-one coaching I'm good with, and team coaching I'm just not sure I've got it. To be honest, I mean, sometimes it works, and other times I'm just thinking, actually this group really needs something, but I sometimes just can't find the gear, and maybe the way you've described it, I think, has something to do with it. I think there's got to be a skill in how do you bring together those quite often disparate, not just ability levels or knowledge levels, but also confidence, willingness, motivation. I'm starting to look in the mirror and go, maybe I'm not that guy, and that's okay. I mean, and I don't want to waste people's time doing something that's not working for them. When it works, it's astonishing, but I'm pretty convinced that's the group rather than me. So, mind you, I'll still, I'll take the check, but I'm pretty sure it's them. Kevin and thanks, Chris. Good insight. Kevin's group.
I can do this one. So we talked about coaching and our experiences, and I'm sorry, the video has just switched off. But we also talked about it because there's different types of coaching. So there's the coaching you've got when there's a formal mentorship program going on. So Kat talked about that, and one of the key things she brought up was that the person leading the coaching needs to be inspirational. There needs to be some reason why you would want to listen to their their insights and when they give them and so forth. And then the other side we talked about was more the informal coaching. So I work in a group where we, you know, in terms of people's learning, that we have 10% that's structured, 20% that's mentored, and the remaining 70% is on the job. And with that, there's a requirement for coaching. And the key with that one is, as the leader, or when you're working with those leaders, that person, when they are coaching someone in the workplace, you know, is that the person who's doing the coaching needs to be present and in the moment and there. And they need, as a leader, you have to dedicate time to it. You can't try and do it and squeeze it in amongst everything else. You need to say that, you know, I'm helping my team get from where they are here to where they need to be. I need to dedicate half my day to it if it's that much. And Kevin brought up a really valid point, that you also need to be conscious of taking in the different people's different preferences for learning and people's different ways that, you know, they like to be delivering. And that also comes down to then when you're coaching bigger groups, because it's really hard to cater for a group of very diverse preferences and trying to bring them up to speed on something. So, you know, we do webinars. I do practice coaching for some of our junior engineers out in industry and things like that. And so I agree with you, Aubrey. I find one-to-ones heaps easier. Big groups, tough, because of what Kevin said of that, you know, the different preferences people have. So that was us in a nutshell.
Lovely, thanks very much. Amanda's group.
Yeah, I was with Max and Kelly, and unfortunately couldn't get Kelly off mute. So, yeah, we were speaking about coaching styles and our experience with coaching and being coached and coaching other people. And one of the things was like being able to step out of a situation and give yourself a different perspective about what could be going on. Max had a good point about asking, you know, what's the other person seeing it from their point of view. So thinking, you know, deliberately about, well, how do they view this situation. So yeah, and also inheriting dysfunctional teams and trying to bring those people along when they've had some pretty poor behaviours modelled to them through previous managers, to gain their trust and to get the team back on track. I think group coaching's a little bit more difficult. You really have to have those one-on-ones before you can engage the full group.
Yeah, and there's that sense of the need for the group to, the group to build trust with each other as well. And you know, part of that, the group coaching process. Peter Hawkins has got some good stuff about getting clarity around the group, and just going back to a conversation Bops was having this before we started around the group's clarity of their purpose, their shared purpose together. And we kind of take that for granted, but often that hasn't actually been established, and you've got people pulling in different directions. Sorry, Mandy, you were asking if there were others in the group.
Yes, I wanted to add anything else.
So I've got an executive coach. My work actually said they wouldn't pay for my MBA, but they'd pay for my exec coach. That's the deal I did at work. And that's been really beneficial for me. We're a pretty big organisation, you know, it's pretty political. So making sure I can navigate the politics was the key development area for me. So that's been really helpful for me to get some coach on that skill, because technically I was pretty good, but the piece around how to navigate that politics was really hard for me. So I found it really, really invaluable. And sometimes I go and I feel like it's a bit like therapy. Work is one of the most stressful parts of my life. So sometimes it's an hour conversation that helps me kind of find a way through the major stressor in kind of my life.
I think that goes to, thanks, Max. It's interesting that often the people who do get executive coaching sometimes they will say, this feels like therapy, and I'm not a therapist, and I swore I'd never be a therapist. And I think what it is the need to actually talk things through, think things through, and that kind of in its own way is a therapy. So you need the space, which was a comment that was made before, and we often don't have that space or take that space. You may not want to answer this, so don't feel any pressure, but on that political perspective, you know, developing that sort of political intelligence, is there something in particular that you've been helped with
Yeah, I think my organisation has paid a lot of money for me to learn like 5 words, like what's happening for this other person on the other side of the table. I think that question's been pretty helpful for me to unlock and be forced to have good empathy. I'm not a super empathetic person in my own right, so that's probably been a bit of a learned behaviour.
And it's pretty powerful. You know, you can never actually know the other person's perspective, but just knowing there is another perspective is pretty powerful. And then if you can harness that as well, so it becomes not a threat, but something to leverage and work with. That's great. So thank you to your company for for providing you with that, and all of us as well. Box, I saw you made a comment there about power. Yeah, did you want to expand on that?
He looks like he's not here.
Yeah, so
We lost him.
He put that in chat. So yeah, talking about power bases, and I was having a conversation. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but he shared something about the importance of power and then loses power in the house. I'm not sure if there's a message in that or not. I was talking to somebody today about that notion of power in a coaching session, a slightly different perspective, and how often we seem to underestimate the power that we have in terms of influence. So, you know, different power bases, so French and Raven's model and different models of power, but appreciating different types of power and how different types of power become more relevant in different contexts. And it's easy and surprising, it seems that sometimes or often we underestimate the actual power and influence that we have with others. Maybe it's modesty, being self-effacing, maybe it's just not, as Max was saying, being able to see how others view us. And that was the conversation that I had recently. Was this person was surprised to the point of being shocked to get this feedback about how others saw them in a positive way, and their influence and their contribution to the business. And they were genuinely surprised. They weren't sort of messing around. And then the challenge, of course, becomes, okay, so now what do I do with that? If that's how people see me, if I genuinely have that level of influence, how do I do it? How do I work with it? Because I haven't actually thought of myself in those ways, but other people are looking at them going, okay, that's what we're expecting. So there's a bit of a gap there. We think you can do this. You're the only one in your way. So the invitation's there. Max, you're smiling in recognition at that. At least that's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, sometimes it's weird to hear feedback like that sometimes, isn't it? I think everyone's been in that position. It's kind of like, I don't know what to do with that. It's easier if you tell me things that are wrong. I can work on that.
Yeah, interesting. All right, let me surf through a couple of things here. Thank you for sharing those perspectives. I think it is important because coaching has become far more common as a practice in organisations, but it's still not really deeply embedded, I think, in most. And we've talked about different aspects. So the external coach perspective, which is the one that I come from, obviously, and then the manager as coach or leader as coach. And there's also peer coaching as well. So, and all of them have validity. And one of the great things that Belinda was making the point about coaching in the moment, looking for those opportunities to apply principles of coaching and even some of the frameworks, because they're usually not very complicated, to apply some of those principles in the moment to actually have an intentional conversation. So one of my early coaching mentors, John Campbell from Growth Coaching International, he had a great line. He said, a coaching conversation is a conversation that's going somewhere. It's an intentional conversation. So we don't just talk about something, we talk about something with a purpose. And the coach's role is often to put that little pointed edge on it that says, okay, so what's next? You know, what are you actually going to do about this? So we've talked about it. Interesting. What are your options? What are you going to do next? And that's part of our responsibility. And it is, I think, to go back to Box's point and what Max was saying, it is a reminder about the power / influence that we have. And sometimes we hold ourselves back from that. But we know from our own experience that it's often a gift when people kind of give us that little extra push and hold us to account. There's a great, I can see Jared, I think you're going to jump in. So I'll just finish this thought that another one of my mentors, the late Mandy O'Bree, she was a fan of a book called Coaching with Backbone and Heart. which kind of summarizes neatly the coaching process. We do need to be empathetic, and we also need to be firm about things. And that's not pushing people around, but they've entered into the coaching conversation. So we need them to stand up straight and take the next step and express confidence in them. And I always joked with her and with others in describing her approach that she was lovely and generous and supportive and encouraging and all those things. And we became aware through the coaching conversation, not literally, but figuratively, of this hand in your back going, okay, and you're going to step into this, aren't you? You're actually going to take the next step. And it was a really great modelling to be a little bit bold about those things. Jared?
No, I was just going to say, the other thing about coaching is it doesn't have, you can get a lot out of like peer coaching at times as well. So I made the point, I think, in the channel the other day that I still regularly meet up with a bunch of people I did the DMBA with, and we coach each other on each other's issues without actually formally having that relationship.
Yeah, it's really, and thank you for making that point when Michelle was sharing her experience with the group, because it is a brains trust, and it's a great resource to draw upon. There's a huge amount of intelligence in it, so, which is why we do breakout rooms and group assignments and things, and so on. A couple of things I just want to highlight in here. This may be bleedingly obvious to everybody else, but I remember when Tony Grant, who is one of our leading coaches in the world of teaching in Australia. He's the author of this and many other books with Jane Green, a great contributor to the coaching space. And he came and worked with our QUT coaches a few years ago. He put this model up on the board, and I just about fell at his feet in gratitude, because my coaching training was very much in the traditional reflective approach. But he talked about 3 different types of coaching, so skills coaching, performance coaching, and development coaching, and that it's okay to tell people how to do things. And it is, think of it as training. It's a form of coaching. So being clear about what the coaching need is. Sometimes it is about specific skills, practices, how to do certain things. You need to make sure you've got those skills in order to do it, or find somebody who can. And then performance coaching, which is about helping people find ways to improve, to extend themselves, to fill in the gap, or stretch into new spaces. So a lot of our workplace coaching is here. This probably comes under training, but it is a form of coaching. And then development coaching is the term that we've referred to before, where the coach is really helping the person develop themselves, both professionally and as a person, because the two ideally go together, not separate worlds, so that they can actually explore possibilities. And that's where you get into the Boyatzis model of ideal self. On that, for what it's worth, if you're really interested in this area, and I'm sure you are, Boyatzis and a couple of his colleagues have got a newish book out, Helping People Change. This is where they pick up their idea of compassionate coaching. And it's actually, I took something that is probably screamingly obvious, but that notion of the ideal self, which I kind of had, I sort of knew what it meant. But in this work, they contrast it with coaching for compliance versus coaching for aspiration and self-actualization, if you like. And we sometimes do have to coach for compliance. That's important. But if we're only coaching people, and the way they described it, the language they used was, the ideal self is not about what I ought to be doing or should be doing, but what I desire, what I want to be doing. And there's a really significant difference. And a lot of us spend a lot of our lives making sure that we're ticking the boxes on what I ought to be doing. And they make the point in the book that we need to be helping people be really clear that the ideal self is not what we ought to be or should be. So it's really good stuff in that. I haven't got a summary of it yet, but I'm working towards it. So when I get that done, if you're interested, I'm happy to share it. So Tony Grant's model, I think, is a really useful one. Sometimes there's another layer that gets put up here about the executive agenda, which is another variation on it. But I found this really helpful in terms of thinking about what's my role as the coach, what are the expectations here, and also what I'm capable of and not capable of in certain situations. I am a fan of Marshall Goldsmith's work, and his model here, the Wheel of Change, I'll just draw your attention to, because I think it's helpful for, and all these are in the handout notes, obviously. It's helpful for thinking about change, because he talks about change that's positive and change that is maybe on the, we've got to deal with some negatives here, and things that we actually want to change, but also coaching for preserving and keeping things. So how do we look after the good things that are already in place? So he's got these scales of creating and accepting. And some things we need coaching on. How do I just accept this? I'm not going to change it. It's the way it is. So how do I learn to live with this? Other times we want to eliminate things, and sometimes we're trying to create something new. So again, it's a useful framework for mapping out what may be happening with others and not making assumptions. And we've heard a couple of times that a lot of coaching is getting people beyond those really embedded cognitive entrenchments, if you like, those neural pathways that have us thinking about things the same way over and over. And as coaches, we can fall into that, obviously, just as easily as others. So it's a useful prompt for thinking about things in different ways. And this is a short video that you can follow up if you want to learn some more about that. This, I think, is in the RISE asset, but I've repeated it here.
Sorry, Aubrey, just
Yes.
when you turn your head and look at the screen, sometimes your audio drops out a little bit. So I don't know if your microphone's too high or too low or something.
Thanks for that, Jared. Appreciate that. I'll try not to turn away. Is that okay now?
Yep, thanks, sorry.
Great. So the coaching practices and the coaching mindset, I think, are really important. And the key one here, I think, to take away is that fundamentally coaches try desperately to avoid giving advice. Now, for coaching for skills, obviously we need to give clear advice. But most of what we know as coaching is staying away from giving advice. And so we've emphasised this in the RISE resources about asking and not telling and so on. The list of coaching, some key coaching skills that we've provided is, said before, lists like this, anybody can come up with a list, but they're useful to us when we actually think about them in relation to ourselves. So how am I doing on a scale of 1 to 10? How do I do with these? And already tonight we've talked about, in a couple of contexts, the value and the need for trust. The interesting thing about trust in coaching is, yes, you need a level of trust for it to work, but the process of coaching often develops trust as well, because you're showing interest in the other person, and the simple act of listening and asking questions and inquiring with a view to their development is a really valuable process in trust building. Being present, managing our attention, which is one of the hardest things to do because there's so many things trying to get our attention. And when we do give our attention to people, that's a massive show of respect. And even if it's difficult and awkward, there's nevertheless that appreciation of the time and effort that somebody's putting into it. So all of these things send powerful signals in their own way. The clarifying one, the fourth one, is I don't have to get clear about it in my mind because I'm not there to solve the problem, it's the coach, but helping the other person to think it through. And a couple of people have made reference to that on the way through as well. The empathizing one is interesting. Not all of us are naturally high on the empathic scale, but we can learn to be empathetic. And one of the things to get comfortable with, I think, is asking that question about how people are feeling about the situation, what they're talking through, which might seem pretty basic, but for a lot of us, it's actually hard to ask that question. But it is an important one because the brain is very much influenced by how we feel about things. Being succinct and helping our coachees be succinct as well, because the more they go on about it, the more obfuscation there can be, and the more sort of dust being thrown in the air. So cutting through and saying, so what's that mean? What's your takeaway from that? Getting people to really get to the heart of it and own their own situation. Okay, so there's a couple of other things there on skills of listening, and this is there are really two key skills in the world of coaching. There's lots of things we want to get good at and lots of models and frameworks we can use, but fundamentally, I think if we get good at asking good questions and listening attentively to the answer and then asking the next question, will go pretty well. That's reinforced in a video that we put up here from, I'll just highlight this. It's only about a 4-minute long video, but it's got two pretty well-experienced coaches, Michael Bungay-Stanier, who's a Kiwi Canadian. I'm not sure where he's living right now, but he's probably been stuck in either place for a while. And he's got one of, I think this is a really good coaching resource, the coaching habit, and the subtitle sort of says it all. Say less, ask more, and change the way you lead. So he's talking about coaching as a leadership skill, and it's often related to leadership. And he's got a very useful model where he lays out some of this is his framework for coaching, and he talks about a very simple process. And this is one when we go into our coaching practice. If you have a familiar coaching model, and we'll look at a couple of those really briefly shortly, then maybe try out a different one. And if you don't have a coaching framework, then pick one that feels right for you. I like Michael's approach because it is very organic. You know, what's on your mind? What's on people's mind is pretty important. And sometimes they won't talk about it unless they're given an invitation. But the next question, the and what else, one of the most powerful things you can do, because, you know, we all do it, don't we? We lead with the low-hanging fruit and we sort of deal with that. And then given the invitation to go deeper, we don't have to take it, but often then we get to the real stuff. So the presenting issue isn't always the overriding one or the most important one. So it's a very simple process, or a framework, maybe is a better way to put it. There's a couple of other coaching models that you'll come across, and apologies for those who know this, but we know that most people are familiar with coaching, but not necessarily approaches to coaching. So there's a number of frameworks that you can use. This is probably the longest standing, and it comes from a guy called John Whitmore, who was one of the pioneers of executive coaching many years ago, wrote one of the classics. It's still available. I mean, you go to most bookstores, you'll still find coaching for performance today. It's called the GROW model. It's very, very simple. What's the goal? What do you want? People talk about a problem and say, okay, that's interesting. So what do you want instead? Well, I don't want this happening. Yeah, okay. So when that's not happening, what do you want to be happening? That's the goal. So the solution focus. It's important to talk about what's wrong, but what do you actually want? Get clear about that, because if you don't know what that is, then it's going to be pretty hard to find it. The reality is talking about what's going on for them now. So getting a clearer sense of what's working for them and what may be working against them. I sometimes use that idea of the force field analysis, where people can start to map out and see what's actually happening. And sometimes you also talk about the resources that people might have available to support them. Then there are options, and this is an important one, particularly for people who are used to being very decisive and just want to make a decision and move on. A chance to draw a breath and say, so before you commit lots of energy to a particular thing, what are your options here? And we sometimes say from the obvious to the out of the box or the outrageous. Give people permission to play with ideas and think a bit more creatively than usual. And then the way forward, or what's next. What will they actually do? Very simple organic process. And this is a model that you can literally use in hallway coaching. I mean, it's very much in the moment coaching. So somebody's got a problem, interesting. So what do you want? What's happening now? What's working for you? What's working against you? What could you leverage? What are your options? And what are you going to do next? We don't have to solve the whole problem, but if we get people moving and trying something in an intentional direction, we've got progress, and we're not spinning our wheels in a downward spiral. If you can spin your wheels in a spiral, I'm not sure, but I think you know what I mean. So the GROW model is outlined in a bit more detail. There's another one from Zinger and Stinnett, who are also leaders in the field. They're the FUEL model, so you'll pick up pretty quickly. Everybody's got their own acronym. And we've got one more acronym to come, which is the one that Dr. Jeff Abbott out of QUT developed a few years ago, and we use fairly widely in our coaching programs, including in the leadership coaching and mentoring. I think it's a great dip. It's been running for a few years. It's a really good program. It's called eFire, and it kind of follows the principles of the others when you look at framing the issue, inquiring about what's happening, reflecting, and then execution. Jeff's very much of the view that we need to keep tapped into people's energy. So what's the care factor for them? And this can go to things like aligning with their values, their sense of purpose and identity, keeping that and checking in with that on a regular basis. So it's a very good tool, and there's a handout in the I think the Explore section of the RISE site that gives you a whole lot of questions that can prompt in each of those areas. And there's also a video that you've got access to where Jeff and Fran Finn, who's our Director of Coaching, talk through an eFire coaching process. So it's a good sort of modelling of how the different components work. And Jeff's very much of the view that structures are good, but you want to be able to iterate and move to where the coachee is. So the reason for offering several frameworks is that hopefully you'll find one or two that are easy go-tos for you, and also to give you some options in different situations. And then, because I couldn't resist it, I put a little piece out of the new newish Boyatzis book in there as well. Two other things that can be interesting, and these are kind of coaching conversations or resources. One is the stay interview, is a sort of different way of coming at coaching, but inviting people into the conversation to really reinforce the fact that coaching is not some sort of punishment. Coaching is not, you've got a problem, let's work on it. It is very much an investment in the person. And sometimes we spend time and resources on exit interviews that tell us all the things that would have been useful to know before the person decided to exit. That can get expensive. So the stay interview gives us an opportunity then to work on areas that people identify for their own performance improvement, their own development areas. And has anybody had a stay, just out of interest, has anybody had a stay interview where somebody came to them and said, okay, so really value what you're doing. What is it that keeps you here? Because you're a talented person.
Actually, yeah, I did.
Okay.
I've only just realised. I've been working in a particular role for a large operation, and I've been working with the dragline, so they're a really big piece of equipment. And I got in the car. I walked out into the crib room one day, and the superintendent that looked after them said, "Come for a ride." So I went and grabbed all my crap and jumped in the car with him, and we went down to the bench to have a look at something. And as we're walking on our way back from the dragline, he said to me, what's keeping you here? What do you, what's the drive for you to continue in this area? What are the things? Are you happy doing this? So, is this where you want to be? Is this what you want to do? And it was quite an interesting conversation. And at the time, I hadn't really thought about it too much. I just, I was just keeping on. And it was definitely thought-provoking, and it definitely caused me to go home and think, I've been doing this for 3 years. Is this just putting one foot in front of the other? Sometimes it's going from one spotlight to the next. And Perko's words were quite interesting. I came back to him in the office a couple of days later, and I said to him, thanks for the conversation. It's made me reconsider some of the things I'm doing. And I said, what have you got for me? Was my next question.
Yeah. That's good, thanks. Anyone else had that sort of experience, formal or informal? Okay, thanks for sharing that, Belinda. It's kind of it's a low-cost intervention, I guess. And if it's true, as I think it is, that people need attention, then it's a fairly simple, low-cost way of expressing that, and it can easily open up and be a gateway to a coaching conversation about future opportunities, or maybe there are points of irritation, but we're not waiting for the problem to be addressed. One other framework that this comes from our colleague Tim Baker. So Tim was ahead of the curve with the performance conversation challenge a few years ago when his book, The End of the Performance Review, and he actually proposed a process of what are essentially coaching conversations, invitations to start talking about things, and similar to what we were saying with the stay interview, it starts with, how are you feeling about things? How are things going for you? What are you noticing about the environment that you're working in? And then the idea is each month you have a focused conversation around how the person's going with their strengths and talents, and then development areas and ideas. With that idea, again, of building trust through ongoing connection and conversations. And so these lead into people developing their own areas to become. Okay, we're about to take our break. Any other observations or questions about coaching at work from your experience? Any of the things that we talked about that resonated with you or raised a question? Okay, I'm going to take that as a hint that we just need to take a break. So let's take our 10-minute break. When we come back, what we'll do is go into just a short practice session where you can try out any one of these frameworks. You've got them in the handouts, one that makes sense to you. I think the approach we'll try for is to have triads, so 3 people in a group. For sake of time, we'll just have 2 people. So you get a role of being coached, be the coach or be the observer, and you'll get to play 2 of those roles, but not 3, just for sake of time. And the coaching context can be really anything that works for you, but a couple of suggestions: a leadership development area for you, a step towards the ideal self, perhaps future directions. Could be a professional or a work issue. We've seen this week, there's a few things going around that. Remember, as the coach, you're not there to solve the problem. Ask the questions and listen. Or anything else. It can be something outside of work as well, but the traditional ones or typical ones in this are your leadership development or a professional work issue. So thanks, Faith. So it's a good opportunity to just try out the tools and observe the process as well. So we'll come back in 10 minutes, and you can self-select into the groups for this one. So we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Damn it, we didn't get to see how the story ended.
We haven't finished either. Oh.
We were this close.
So close.
Drama of the coaching session.
Hi.
You got no idea.
Kevin, if you wanted to continue that conversation, let me know.
Man, it sounds
Having a lot of laughs at the same time.
sounds like you can sell tickets to this one. All right, thank you for doing that, and it's nice to see people come back in the room smiling as well. Coaching can be fun, and apparently interesting as well. So Michelle,
put a hand up.
Yes.
Not on purpose. Okay. Very polite.
Just practicing. Yeah. Make it go away.
Oh, look, there, I did it.
Nicely done. All right, so just a quick around the groups for a reflection, observations, and now Max is into the act with a thumbs up as well. So we're giving the reactions a workout tonight. That's good. We probably don't use them enough. Let's start. Observations on the process, things you noticed, either about technique or how the coaching conversation unfolded, or even about your own experience of it. Bonnie's group, first up.
I'll speak. So I was the coachee, and in that 10 minutes, Chris coached me to plan my future for the next 5 to 10 years. So it went very well and was a hard act to follow.
Wow.
Yeah, did an excellent job.
So what worked particularly well for you, without going into the detail of it, but? Yeah,
it was just a natural conversation. So, and it flowed logically, and Chris asked well-considered questions, and that were quite, they were easy to understand and to reflect upon, but there's a different aspect that haven't, necessarily thought about mindfully before. And Chris just did a great job of moving that through. So
well done, Chris. So I've got to go to Chris now and say, what's your secret?
I use the FUEL framework, to be honest. So I just asked a series of questions to try and frame the problem up, so that I could understand as well. I think it benefited me to frame it so I can understand just as much as helping Amanda understand. And then we kind of went through the explore options. I kind of went into it. I guess I kind of understood her problem, right? So I was able to just I could see where she was getting her own way a little bit. So it's like, well, let's look at this, and then the rest of it's easy from there. The succession plan, you just keep probing them until they come up with a plan.
Interesting. And the only observation I would have about the way you described it, Chris, is to take out the word just, which is a general thing for lots of us. You know, I just did this and I just did that. If you say it again without the just, it does make a difference, because what you did is, there's no just in it. It's I did this and I did that, and it makes a huge difference. And it sounds like Amanda is delighted, and it's amazing the ground you can cover even in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I added a bit more clarity and logic to my considerations. So
it's that, and Chris reflected this too, helping people to think it through from a different perspective. And that's the power of the question, is that it doesn't tell you what to think, but it invites you to think about something from a different perspective. So it's I think it's in the notes, because I put it in as many places as I can. I love De Bono's principle that unless we direct our attention, we only see familiar patterns. And most of us deal with problems and thinking about things just by going through the same thought patterns, and they become entrenched. And then somebody says, and what would happen if? And we go, oh, well, I hadn't actually thought about that. And that's a huge gift. And sometimes never be offended in your coaching if you ask a question and somebody responds and you work through it and they go, you know what, I knew all of that. And I remember the first time I heard it and I thought, well, what did you need me for then? It almost sounded like a put down. But actually what they were saying was, you helped me bring it back to the front of my mind. It was kind of in there, but I wasn't accessing it anymore. And that's reassuring for them, that they're not doing something that they didn't already know or countenance. It's bringing it back into the forefront and saying, that has value, I could do that. And that's part of the gift. So thanks very much. Kelly's group.
I was in that.
Megan.
So Max and then I had a bit of a go of coaching Kelly. I think what we did really well is that we spent a fair bit of time at the start, like, you know, getting to know each other, having a bit of a chat, just generally like developing trust and kind of,
good,
you know, a mutual understanding, like more than, you know, jumping straight into like, oh, here's my coaching, like, yeah, let's coach. And I think that actually then helped us then to have a more natural conversation about what was happening in each other's lives. And then from there, really look into like identifying the problem that was occurring more than actually jumping, you know, I think that there's a tendency to jump to solutions quite quickly, which both Max and I did. And then we were like, oh, well, actually that's a solution. So why not asking more questions.
That's, yeah, thank you. Two really good points there, at least. One about the relationship building, which is true for any group and any conversation. Next week, we'll talk about difficult conversations and feedback and conflict. And we deliberately emphasize positive communication practices and connecting with people, then talk about coaching. And then if you've got to have the hard conversation, then at least hopefully there's a foundation that we've built a relationship and there's some trust there. But if the only time I hear from you is when I've screwed up, it's always going to be a difficult conversation. And it goes back to something that was said earlier, and apologies, I can't remember who said it, but laying that foundation of making sure that we make time to be present with people as much as possible, even emphasizing our visibility so people know who we are and that we're not as scary, particularly as our roles become more responsible. We forget that we can actually become there's a risk factor associated with it. It's because of power. And that power can be a wonderful tool for us and vehicle, but it can get in our way as well. So being accessible and being present. So the relationship building is important. The small talk, if you like, but that's creating that ground to work on. One of the techniques that I was taught was starting the conversation either formally or informally with, tell me something good that's happened in the last week, sort of like what we did at the start. And that's not the reason I was doing it. I try to do that every time because I think it's important for us to reconnect as a group and just share something. But there is something about saying to somebody, so what's happened since we last caught up, something positive. And sometimes you see people go, and they got to dig to find something. But then they remind themselves the world is not all completely doom and damnation. There are good things happening. And that's important because a positive mindset helps us be more open to possibilities. And sometimes that's our role in coaching is, we're going to talk about some tough stuff potentially, and got to work with the good stuff as well. Well done, you, and celebrating those things with people. So really good observation about that.
That sounds like me with my kid and her homework tonight.
Yeah, parent has coach.
Yes.
It's a great ground for practicing your coaching skills until they work out that you might be practicing on them, and then they don't want to know.
Yeah, they're still too small to figure that out yet.
Yeah, see, enjoy that. And also Megan's point about really understanding what the problem is. Not that we need to become experts in the problem, but we do need to get clarity about what it is and what it isn't, because sometimes we make assumptions about what the problem is on both sides. And so just exploring it and getting some clarity about that. So thank you very much. And Kathy's group.
Michelle and I were both observers. We started out with 2 people and then we ended up with 4. So we had 2 observers,
Yes.
a coach and a person being coached. So Belinda was the one being coached. Lorna was the one doing the coaching. And we used the that blue book one. What was the one, Michael something, the blue and the yellow cover?
Oh, Bungay Stania. Yeah. The coaching habit.
Sorry?
The coaching habit. Michael Bungay Stania, I think, is the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
That one?
Yeah. So
Beautiful.
that's the one. And it was really interesting listening to Lorna's, the one as they were written, but she did it in a way that was conversational and just flowed naturally. And because I was looking at it, I can be quite literal minded, particularly when I'm learning something for starters.
Yeah.
And I would have just quite literally just scoped through. But Lorna sort of brought the questions in really easily and just linked the questions from one to the other. And it was a really good example. I really enjoyed observing it because it helped give me some clarity on how to do it.
Yeah. And so well done, Lauren. If you want to chime in and tell us why,
Thanks,
how
Kathy.
you did that. But yeah, one observation just before that is, often people will say, "Oh, look at these coaching frameworks," and it feels kind of unnatural or artificial or contrived. To which my response is yes. That doesn't make it bad. It means it's new and different. And so trust the process, like another group used the fuel process. Trust the process. It will be clunky the first couple of times for sure, but the structure actually is often reassuring, not just for you as a coach that there is a process, but also for the coachee, that they realize you don't have some magic coach chip in your head that they don't understand. You can be quite transparent and say, I've got this framework, I'm going to work through a few questions, happy to show it to you. I'm going to talk about the goal, the reality, the options or whatever, or I'm going to ask you what's going on, and then is there anything else, blah, blah, blah. It's reassuring for them that there's a structure to it. But you're right, it does feel awkward sometimes to ask some of the questions. And the thing I had to learn, because I was terrified I was going to look stupid, which is just a curse of my personality. But I realized that it doesn't matter how comfortable or uncomfortable I am with the question. Sometimes what I think is the dumbest question is the question where somebody goes,
Yeah.
wow, and then I go, yeah, think about it. So you never know what's going to work for the other person's brain. Lauren, anything you wanted to add to that?
It felt like reading the questions first. It was really like I just felt I had to restrain myself from filling in the blanks. And the hardest one was going from how can I help, and then Belinda giving me, like asking me specific questions about what she wanted me to help with, and then going, if I was to give you that, what would you say no to? It was just so weird, but it worked well.
No, but it was awesome, Lorna.
All of a sudden she's like, well, you know what? I just need to block out time and make it non-negotiable. And that's when I need to do my reading. And it was like, and the reason when we came back into the room, we were laughing going, oh, we need more time, is because I asked the question, what was most useful for you? And then there was this delay as we entered back into the room.
Oh, no.
So we don't know, but we got there in the end. So I guess that's what matters.
Well, we've, Belinda, I see you've come off mute. You've got 30 seconds to tell, because we've got to do one more thing here, 30 seconds to tell Lorna what was most useful for you, if you're happy to do that publicly.
What the most useful thing with this, because one of the things we did was we went through these as a group and looked at the ones that actually meant the most to us, that felt the most organic, the most easiest for us to set. I think the most useful thing for me as the person being coached was that it didn't feel like I was being coached. And Lorna, I'll be back to ask you for those tips and tricks that we didn't quite clarify.
Gladly.
Nice.
Gladly.
Yeah. And that's a really encouraging observation, that if we can, yes, it is coaching, and one of the piece of advice is be the coach. I mean, play that role. That's what you're there for, not to be the friend, not to be the solver of problems, not to be the agony aunt, you know, all those sort of things. You're just there to be the coach, so play the role. And often a good coaching conversation, you'll forget as the coachee that you're being coached. I mean, it's a conversation. It's an intentional conversation. So that's a nice compliment. Well done, and thanks for all participating. And apologies, it has to be so short. It's just sake of time, but there's nothing stopping you from continuing the conversation as you've indicated. We are 5 minutes from the close, so I just want to, I want to remind you, the good news and even better news. Good news, assessment 1 is done. Well done you. Even better news, assessment 2 is now all ready and waiting for you to start applying your attention to. So take some time to familiarise yourself with the task description, which, apologies, is missing the word count. And I saw the rather ambitious option of just writing 500 words. And as Jared said, if you can,
I was about to say I can. I'm getting my infographics ready as we speak.
If you can satisfy the CRA in 500 words, let us know how you do that. So it's the second assessment is obviously it's an individual assessment, and it's a really, particularly I think at this point of the program, a really rich one to get your teeth into in terms of, you know, what all this stuff is meaning for you. So you can see hopefully how it fits with that whole intentional change model as well. And at this point, with what you've gone through, not just in this program, but my goodness, in life, just in the last couple of years, it's been a hell of a time. So there's all sorts of rich learning to put in there. So 2,500 words shouldn't be too much of a problem. The problem might be constraining it to that, but hopefully it's a really rich and valuable learning exercise. And remember too, even though this is an individual assessment, you can still draw on each other's experience and ask each other for some coaching around what you're looking at. I mean, it's a great opportunity to do that. Jared or Bops, anything that you want to add about the second assessment?
I think the main point that I'd like to bring up is to start asking the questions, and you got a bit of a taste of it tonight through the coaching experience. If you can apply that to the assessment as well, that would be great, just to start to unpack what's being asked.
Good advice. Okay, thank you very much for being here tonight. And if you weren't able to make it, thanks for watching the recording. Hope it's been helpful. And it's getting to that end of the year, and everybody I'm talking to is going, are we there yet? But there's still so much to do. So take care of yourselves and hopefully each other as you have the opportunity to do that as well. Stay in touch, and I'll look forward to seeing you again next week, which I'm sure will come around pretty quickly. So enjoy the rest of your evening and the night.
Thanks, Aubrey.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Hey guys, chimed in really late today, but I just wanted to ask quickly, if that's okay, just a quick question about the assignment. Are we still writing it from the perspective of being the the company that's come in to help, or are we meant to be writing it from us taking on that leadership role which was trying to be filled essentially? I just want to make sure I've got my right frame of mind, because the first one was about doing up this magical coaching plan, which is going to be at the core of everything that we do. But now it's more like actually implementing it.
Just give me a second. Bops or Jared, if you want to jump in, I'm just pulling up the task instructions to make sure.
I'm madly looking that up as well.
Yeah. Reason for that is I'm familiar with this in another unit context, and I've got that in my brain rather than this one. So pulling it up here. Here we go.
It's helpful to know that we use that as our guide as well, though. I'm sure there are no tricks.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So you can use the assessment 1 scenario if you want.
Okay.
But really what this is about, the simple version of the principle underpinning this is we want you to take the stuff that you've explored in the unit so far and apply it to your own leadership as it would apply to your own workplace. So that's what most people do unless it just isn't possible for whatever reason, is they look at an issue that's happening in their workplace. So it might be similar to the one in the case study, or it may be a conflict situation, it may be a change process, it might be a merger, it might be going through a process of, it could even be, you know, the contemporary one now of how do we start really intentionally working with hybrid arrangements, for example. So that might be the issue or opportunity or challenge. So the first paragraph of the task description. And then you describe it, analyze it, you know, what are the moving parts, what are the issues here, and then you put together a plan or a strategy for an effective leadership response from yourself and or the leadership team. And then the second paragraph in the description says you could also choose to use the assessment scenario if you don't have another one. But generally, if you choose something that's in your world, it's going to have more value to you and more relevance.
Okay. So like in our first assessment where we were talking about whether we keep the team or don't keep the team and how we're going to get them more involved, and we say that we want to retrain them to actually implement Icarus or whatever it was, are we meant to draw on that in this assessment, or is that linking it too much back to assessment 1?
Yeah, I'd put assessment 1, put that case to one side.
Okay.
Obviously, some of the things some of the frameworks and some of the principles within them may apply to your situation.
Yeah.
But you really need to look at the issue that you're dealing with in your workplace.
Okay. Yeah. So like from my workplace, I couldn't really draw on this because our team just, excuse my language, but we just fucking murder everything that we do. So like, we're really good at what we do, and everyone's loving what we're doing. So I don't have conflict to draw on, and like we're performing basically at peak constantly, and that's it. Like we've almost got no space.
There's always an opportunity though, so it does say an opportunity or an issue. So I'd encourage you to try and think, well, how the opportunity might be, how do we sustain this? The opportunity might be, how can we still get incrementally better, and that sort of thing. So don't constrain yourself just to the issues, is all I'd say.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that exactly what Jared said. I would say if you've got something that's good, that is that good, then the risk obviously is what happens if something wobbles, if you lose someone, or if the context change, or if there's increased demands or whatever. So that wheel of change, I don't know if you were here when we were looking at that earlier, but in the notes, Goldsmith's wheel of change might be an interesting one. So there's stuff you need to keep, stuff to eliminate, stuff to change, and stuff to create. That might be a useful framework to think about that through. Yeah, preserving a high performing team, you know, maintaining them and not just burning them out is potentially a good topic to address.
Okay.
And also look at you know, the whole work-life balance. If you are working at capacity, how's that impacting the work-life balance? There are alternatives to the professional or the work life that you can draw on and focus on as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right. No, thank you for that. That helps. And I just wanted to point out, Jared, behind you, that's where I work. You can actually see the name of my
Findex.
company where we work, Findex. It's just in the background.
Just wave to him.
I use this all over the place. Even when I'm down in Canberra, people aren't sure if I'm actually in the office or not.
Yeah. I was looking at it thinking, he couldn't be, it's dark outside, but it's a good virtual background. It blends in very nicely. Yeah. Okay, excellent. No worries. Thank you so much, guys. It helps to reframe what I'm thinking about how to write this assessment.
Thanks for the question. It's a good one.
Have a nice one. Thanks, guys. All right,
See ya. All right. Thanks, Pops. Thanks, Jared.